This is an Empty Closet Radio podcast. Get more at facebook.com/emptyclosetradio.
Hi, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Sam.
And this is The Empty Closet.
The show for everyone, whether you're in the closet
Or out and proud.
or somewhere in between.
.9 Coast FM. You're in the Empty Closet with Andrew and Sam. Now, Sam, it has been a huge week in LGBTIQ politics. Lots and lots of stuff coming up. So, of course, we're going to talk a little bit about it on the show. Maybe you'll get a picture of how it actually affects LGBT people, as opposed to having all these politicians talk on our behalf.
We are, speaking of politics, we're also going to talk about some fresh new political news. Some of the why it's a thing that's happening, dual citizenship. What does that actually mean for Australian politics? And we're going to talk a bit about the media representation, or sometimes misrepresentation, of news and quotes.
I love short news, like bite-sized news. So we'll talk about that all coming up in today's show. If you'd like to catch up on any of our previous podcasts, make sure you subscribe to our podcast feed. Just use whatever app you normally use for podcasts, search for Empty Closet Radio, hit the subscribe button, and you'll be kept up to date every week with a brand new episode. If you don't have a normal podcasting app, just search on the whatever search engine you use, and you'll be able to find Empty Closet Radio. I think we're like the first or second one in the main search engine, Sam. It's quite an achievement, I believe.
We've done very well.
So make sure you do look us up. Also, we're on all the socials, Empty Closet Radio. Make sure you like us and send blue tweeting things at us and all sorts of stuff. You're on 101.9 Coast FM in the Empty Closet. I'm Andrew, and this is Sam. Let's play a song.
Empty Closet Radio. Listen to us using your TuneIn radio app on your smartphone. Very smart.
You're on 101.9 Coast FM. You're in the Empty Closet with Andrew and Sam. And before we get into the more intense portion of the show, Andrew's going to tell us about the weekend, or as I like to call it, the time Andrew went camping.
I like it how you're like, this is the only time ever. I have been camping before.
You did. Remember, you've been fishing once. Like, it's not an unreasonable expectation.
Do camping and fishing really go hand in hand?
Yes.
Oh, well, I've never ever caught a fish while I've been camping, so I guess I've just never understood the connection. Once I camped next to a billabong. That's probably the closest that I ever got. And now that I live up in Queensland, so that was when I was in Victoria. Now that I live in Queensland, I would never ever have set up my tent that close to the edge of a body of water, ever. I probably would not have survived the night.
So where did you go camping? What was the go? Tell us funny stories.
Okay, so when I moved up to Cairns, I thought, oh, this is going to be great. I, of course, was into this relationship, and I thought, oh, well, you know what? As a couple, we'll be able to go camping all the time. It'll be so much fun. That never happened. I brought my tent and everything up, and it sat underneath the bed for, I don't know, 2 years, something like that. And then when I moved house, sat under the bed for another year. And then when I moved house, sat under the bed for a bit longer, until this weekend when I finally got my camping gear out, and I was like, oh, it's all in beautiful condition, because, you know, I like to buy nice things, Sam. So I bought nice camping gear, and, you know, I get to the island where we're going to be camping, and I go to set up my tent, and the tent just all clicks together perfectly. Everything's going swimmingly well. And then I get out my air mattresses. So I've got 2 air mattresses because they fit perfectly in the bottom of my tent, because it's a 2-man tent, but it's kind of a funny shaped 2-man tent. Anyway, it's more like a hiking tent because it's really light. Anyway, so I get out the air mattresses, I'm blowing them up, you know, it's all happening. And then I discover the first one, it's got a bit of a hole in it, doesn't it? And when I say a bit of a hole, massive, like the air is gushing out. I can't even get the air in as quickly as it's leaving. And turns out, upon closer inspection, what has happened is the glue around the nozzle has come become unstuck in, I guess, because of the heat and the humidity and, all the rest of it up here. All the other deadly stuff that we have up here. Why not kill my air mattress as well? Thanks. And then I thought, oh, well, no sweat. I'll get my other one out and I'll just use that and I'll just have to sleep on one instead of two. Lucky it wasn't planned to have two people in the tent. It was just a one-person thing anyway. So I get it out, I unroll it, I start blowing it up, and then guess what?
I'm guessing that there's another hole.
In the exact same position as what the previous one was. Oh my goodness, it was a disaster.
So what, did you just pile up towels or lay on the beach or scavenge for air mattresses? What did you use duct tape to fix it?
Well, I tried really, really hard to use, how they come with that patching glue and patches? So I tried really, really hard to use the glue to re-glue everything together. That worked somewhat, but not really well enough. I had just come off a night shift, Sam, and it was 11 a.m. in the morning, and I was I have hardly slept for 24 hours. So I crawled inside. Once I thought that I'd fixed it enough, I crawled inside the tent, lay down, and passed out, and I woke up and I was just laying on the ground, literally on the ground. There was nothing, no air in that mattress at all. So despite my best efforts, was not able to fix it. Luckily, a knight in shining armor offered to share their hotel room with me. Luckily. Sam, why are you laughing? These are the actions of a very considerate person.
I'm sure that it's all goodness and light and no ulterior motives at all.
It was goodness and light. It was it was a spare bed in their hotel room, so it was 2 single beds.
See, that's what you should have led with if you wanted less laughing.
But maybe I didn't want less laughing, Sam. Yes, so to my good friend Neil, thank you. You saved a damsel in distress.
You could have led with that as well.
But that ruins the story, Sam. Now, we'll come back after this song with something much more, serious. All right, you're on 101.9 Coast FM in the Empty Closet with Andrew and Sam.
Empty Closet Radio. Like us on Facebook.
101.9 Coast FM, you're in the Empty Closet with Andrew and Sam. Now, Sam, everybody's been talking about this, something about marriage equality and blah, blah, blah. Lucky we haven't had our marriage laws changed in, forever. I'm just such a traditionalist in this manner.
Can't even focus at your sarcasm. No, look, marriage, for starting, marriage is not a faith-based institution. We think it is, but for the first 800 years of, say, the Christian church, they didn't want any part of marriage. That was something people did asides from religion, and it came into it later.
Yeah, because religions were super good at keeping records on people, and they realized they could get money from the government for doing marriages.
Yeah, and they could also then, inject themselves into people's lives in a different way. All power to the church in the 800s, I guess. But in Australia, as in modern Australia, since it was colonised, marriage has not stayed the same, as you're probably aware.
What were the first rules for marriage?
Well, I don't know about the absolute first ones, but the first biggest change came in 1884, so that was quite some time ago.
Yeah, hang on, wait. That's is that before we even became the country of Australia?
Yes, so this is when we were still states and colonies. Victoria became the first Australian colony to pass legislation allowing married women the right to own property. Now, this followed the UK because before this point, a woman lost her individual identity. For the purposes of the government, she and her husband were one person, and that was her husband. So she ceased to be a person. And if you're not a person, you can't own property.
Victorians, they've been paving the way in forever. Still the most progressive state.
I love how proud you are. But Jumping forward a bit, 1918, and I'm a little surprised by this because I actually thought it came in earlier. The Aboriginals Ordinance, 1918, came in, and that was the first real restriction on marriage between Indigenous Australians and non-Indigenous Australians, and it was very specific. Indigenous women could not marry non-Indigenous men. It kind of was under the guise of they weren't counted as people, but when they were wards of the state, and so you had to get state permission because they were state property.
Oh, yeah, because people can be state property. But that's kind of interesting because that's the same sort of writing in of discrimination that we have seen later, and I'm sure you're going to tell us about later.
Yeah, we'll get to that. The happy anniversary was yesterday, by the way, of the most recent written in bit of legislation.
Woo! Happy anniversary, John Howard!
12 years. Yay! Now, this is a positive one. The marriage age raised in 1942, so, not all that long ago, I guess. Before that, Tasmania, first state to do it, raised the minimum age of marriage from 12 in women and 14 in men to 16 and 18 respectively.
Oh my God. Now they're trying to lower the average age that people are getting married at. It's crazy.
I get it from a property point of view, as horrible as that sounds. That was kind of the thing, that way they're somebody else's responsibility, but it's still kind of terrible for us now. We would not consider that okay.
But also, I suppose if you start when you're young, and because you might die pretty early back in these days, if you start when you're young, then you might have a chance of actually caring for your children.
Next major piece of legislation regarding marriage in Australia came in 1961, November 9th, and that was the Marriage Act. And you might have noticed that a lot of the things at this point have been one state passing something and then the rest of the states follow. This was basically to make marriage laws uniform across the country. So it sets the minimum marriage age for both sexes at 18. It does not formalise the definition of marriage. That's something that comes later, as we know.
John Howard. Thanks, Johnny. So this is the 1960s. This is the same time when, we're building suburbs like well, we're still doing that, let's be honest. And we just built Canberra, so they're all busy writing new laws that are all nationalised, aren't they?
They are, and 5 years later, they abolished what they called the marriage bar. So basically, if you were a married woman, you could not be employed in the Commonwealth Public Service. So if you were a nurse in a hospital and you got married, you could no longer work as a nurse.
Part of me says, was that changed so that they would have more access to workforce, or was it changed for people's rights?
I don't know, but it was introduced because it was intended to keep women from stealing men's jobs, and also but it was also done to boost the birth rate, because if you had women at home, they were having more babies. The look on your face is fantastic. You just look like somebody's given you vaguely rotten sandwich for lunch.
Yeah, but it's these arguments are the exact same things that we hear people talking about, for all kinds of issues that are still around today. For example, we can't take refugees because they're going to steal our jobs.
There's still people who think that women shouldn't be paid the same as men because men need to earn more to support their families. It's just that it's not the popular opinion anymore.
If men want to earn more, go and get a job that pays more and compete against women for it.
Which is kind of easy.
Yeah.
Because they still pay more. But the consequence of this is that a lot of women kept their marriages secret. They would work under their maiden name and would lie about having a husband. So I don't know that it actually worked for what it was intended to do, but it was abolished, which was good.
Well, the good thing is now we can all work until literally the day that we die. Great.
Hooray! Empty Closet Radio. Like us on Facebook. Marriage is a legal contract in this country that recognises your relationships and confers certain rights that civil unions and domestic partnerships don't have, de facto partnerships. But as I said, it's not necessarily a religious institution. And in 1973, the first civil celebrant was appointed in Australia. So you didn't have to get married in a church or a synagogue or a temple. You could get married on a beach, which is very popular.
Which is a huge industry for Cairns now. I was talking to a celebrant at the weekend, weekend, and she said like 85% of her work is people from down south, and all they want is like a white marriage on the beach.
Yeah. But what I also find exciting is the first civil celebrant was a 26-year-old woman, which is kind of cool.
Good on her. I think it's very, very good to, go and do these things, shake them up, do things that are not in line with what society expects.
And the next step was more about the end of marriages than the start, and that was the introduction of the no-fault divorce. So prior to 1975, mid-1975, you had to have one of the parties had to have done something wrong. So you had to prove my husband's had an affair, or I don't even know, she's stealing money from me or something. You had to prove fault. And if you couldn't prove fault, or if you didn't want to bring it up in court, there was no way to leave your partner. So the no-fault divorce, you still needed to be separated for 12 months, and that was enough to prove that the marriage had broken down.
So now you can just be like, we've fallen out of love and decided to go our own ways because it's the best.
But it also means that if you don't want to talk about why you're leaving, you don't have to. It's irreconcilable differences. It did lead to a temporary giant spike in divorce rates, but that didn't hold. I think it was just all the people who were waiting, like, for a reason to go.
Is that like the temporary spike in gay marriages that might happen after it finally gets approved?
Possibly. And we're going to jump right forward to 2001 when, speaking of marriage equality, the Netherlands, not really a surprise if anyone's been to Holland, becomes the first country to legalise marriage equality, to extend marriage laws to include same-sex couples. And this became a really big thing, obviously, internationally. It got talked about a lot. And remember how the Marriage Act never defined what marriage is?
Oh, yes.
Well, in 2004, a gay couple in South Australia, I think it was, two men, wrote to the Prime Minister to verify if they could get married in Australia because it wasn't specifically included under Australian law. And within a month, Prime Minister John Howard had amended the Marriage Act to add the following definition: marriage means the union of a man and a woman to the exclusion of all others voluntarily entered into for life. Certain unions are not marriages.
They should have just not written to him and just gotten married.
Well, there had been other people who did that, but they wanted to verify their legal status because, again, there's legal ramifications for this contract. So it also specified that a union solemnised in a foreign country between a man and another man or a woman and another woman must not be recognised as a marriage in Australia. So it also formally structured in that you couldn't get married overseas and have it recognised here. And it also structured in that travelling couples, if they were same-sex and married, would not be recognised if something went wrong in Australia. And that's caused some political brouhaha a few times.
It's not very good that all these changes got, silently added in. I don't remember anyone talking about it back then.
There was no giant postal vote.
Yeah, just like there shouldn't be now.
But they did try to rectify that de facto relationships had more rights in common with married couples. It's still not the same, but they get some of the same tax breaks. But that varies state to state, and it depends on how long you've lived together. And then we're kind of getting to where we are now. So the plebiscite was initially defeated. The compulsory plebiscite came back, was defeated again in Parliament, and we now possibly have a postal vote, depending on the brouhaha that's going on at the moment.
So when we come back, I think what we'll talk about is what is actually happening with this whole postal vote scam. You're on 101.9 Coast FM in the Empty Closet with Andrew and Sam.
I can tell where the story ends, so I close my eyes and I count to 10.
Empty Closet Radio, because no one else wants to be stuck in the closet. God.
101.9 Coast FM, you're in the Empty Closet with Andrew and Sam. Now, Sam, it's going to be very, very important in the near future for everybody to check their letterboxes quite regularly. And this is not because you know that you're going to have some special, they're starting to advertise you can lay by for Christmas now. Not the reason why you need to check your letterbox. The reason why you need to check is you're going to be getting some kind of scam postal vote that is officially sanctioned at least by the lower house of government.
Although that may yet change, and we'll come back to that. But so calling it a plebiscite is not quite right. This is a voluntary postal survey, is the official title now.
Which is a nice way of saying we are trying to appease everyone by doing more surveying on something that we already have data for.
Mostly it's just making everyone on all sides angry because it's a giant waste of money. But, let's not talk about the giant waste of money. For listeners, couple of things you need to do if you feel that, or I'm just going to tell you, you should all vote. If you're listening to this show, you should vote. You should vote for marriage equality. Let's be honest. There's no other reason you'd be listening to this show.
Well, not necessarily. Think about what's the downside. I've brainstormed it. I can't really see a downside. It just benefits people, benefits equality, benefits everyone.
If you want to we won't do a thorough analysis on today's show because it will probably result in me getting really angry, and we've had enough of that lately, probably. But if you do want a thorough analysis of the arguments for and against and why some of them are perhaps more confusing, more misleading, more dishonest than others, occasionally on both sides, you have a look on the internet. There's plenty on there. You can get into rage debates for me. It'll be great. But in the meantime, couple of tips. One, make sure, Andrew who's moved house, make sure that your electoral roll is up to date with your current address, because the survey is not being done by the Electoral Commission. It's being done by the Bureau of Statistics, who stuffed up the census, but they are running off the Electoral Commission roll. So your address needs to be up to date because it is an anonymous survey, and if it's not, whoever's at your old place can just write whatever they like.
Does that mean we can do it online, Sam?
No, it does not mean we can do it online, Andrew. Now, a couple of other things, and I keep seeing this go around online. Do not stuff the envelope with glitter. Just don't resist the temptation. Please resist the temptation. Do not stuff the envelope with glitter. One, the poor person who has to read the votes is probably not the person you're annoyed with. Two, there's a very good chance that it will invalidate the vote because it's seen as destruction of government property and they'll just bin it. So you kind of defeat the point. And three, if you're really that keen on glitter, send it to your local member or to Canberra, I guess, in a separate envelope. You can send 2 letters in a year, Andrew. I was astonished to find this out, but it's true.
I haven't sent a letter for a long time, Sam. I just send packages. That's what eBay's done for us.
Well, you'll have to send a package full of glitter then.
Oh my god, I can. It should be spring-loaded, so literally as soon as you open the package, it's boom, all over you.
There's actually a website that will send glitter to people for you. You can go on there and they'll sort it out.
I'm going to find out who our local federal member is, and we'll put their details up so that everyone can put glitter bombs.
Now, we are lucky, though. Our federal member is probably one of the most vocal supporters in the entire parliament for marriage equality. And he's not a member of the Labor Party or the Greens, so he's been talking about this longer than Labor has supported it. So maybe don't glitter bomb him. Maybe glitter bomb Barnaby Joyce.
Barnaby Joyce isn't going to be there for too much longer anyway, I'm pretty sure.
Maybe you don't actually have to glitter bomb anyone. I'm not actually saying you have to glitter bomb someone.
Can I send to Barnaby Joyce a glitter bomb that's full of glitter shaped in little maps of New Zealand?
If you can find glitter like that, I guess.
Wouldn't it just be hilarious?
It sounds genuinely terrible. But anyway, you're on 101.9 Coast FM. You're in the Empty Closet with Andrew and Sam.
Too young, they fall. That's just the way life goes. One more empty home.
Empty Closet Radio, facebook.com/Empty Closet Radio.
101.9 Coast FM, you're in the Empty Closet with Andrew and Sam. Now, Sam, it might be news to you, but I have a confession to make. I'm never going to be able to run for politics because I have another citizenship as well. What a traitor.
Gasp. So if you are listening to this on your drive home after having been nowhere near social media or the news all day long, you may not be aware that amongst the political members in Australia, the elected officials who are dual citizens and have either stood down or are awaiting High Court commission, Barnaby Joyce today was confirmed as a New Zealand citizen as well as an Australian citizen. So Andrew is an Australian-American citizen. I'm apparently an Australian-New Zealand citizen, which is quite exciting for me because I've been keen to get another passport, so now I can have 2.
And now, when you go overseas to countries other than your home countries, then you can choose which one you travel on. It's very complicated. And in some countries where you're a dual citizen, you still have to pay 2 lots of tax.
not for me, but yes for you. Now, you might be wondering, particularly if you're our age or younger, what is the go with dual citizens and not being allowed to be in politics? What's the go? Makes no sense.
Well, but it kind of half makes sense. Like, it makes sense that you shouldn't have you shouldn't be, I don't know, you shouldn't be involved with other countries, particularly in times that might be like, tense global times. Imagine if someone was like a dual citizen of, I don't know, someone who, like a country that wasn't one of Australia's alliance partners.
Well, I'm really not. I don't think that a citizenship for a country you don't live in and don't communicate with and possibly have never lived in is not really a detrimental thing to politics. But this is a holdover from a time where citizenship was a much bigger deal. So you didn't really have dual citizens. You could really only be born maybe into dual citizenship, but even then you were the citizen of the country you were born in.
And that's mainly because people didn't travel as much. Like, it was much more difficult to travel and have information traveling from one place to another and people traveling from one place to another.
Yeah, we're a more globalized world now, so there also wasn't like the international market in the same way there is now. There was lots of legal and illegal trading depending on what time period in history you're talking about, but your personal identity was all tied up in your country. So this is a piece of legislation that is kind of reflective of that. Is the idea that if your whole family's German, and you moved here from Germany when you were 5, but you're raised as Germans and there's nothing else in your household, then you're not really an Australian. That's the old perception. Doesn't really match up with what's going on now, but legalities often take a while to catch up with what else is going on. So that's why elected politicians being dual citizens is seen as a conflict of interest. If we go to war with New Zealand tomorrow because Barnaby Joyce says we have to, or whatever, who's side he's going to be on?
Let's face it, we'd win. They have no army.
It's not the point. Not the point at all.
If they ever give up on being New Zealand, they're always welcome to be just another state of Australia.
They are never, ever, ever going to agree to be a state of Australia. I would not if I was if I was New Zealand and my bogan big brother was going, you can hang out with me, I'd be like, cheers, I'm just going to stay over here. Thank you.
They're like, thanks, but no thanks. So this Barnaby Joyce character, he is
he's the deputy PM of the country currently.
You never hear about any of these people unless they've done something wrong. So yeah, he's quite high up. He's in cabinet.
The biggest thing with this, though, aside from what is going on with the government and all these people who are dual citizens, some of which did know beforehand, Malcolm Roberts, but the biggest thing with this is the LNP, which is the ruling power in the government, only has the majority in the lower house by 1 seat. So if they lose Barnaby Joyce, we have a hung parliament, which probably means we have another election. Maybe means we don't have a postal vote. So there's a lot up in the air at the moment.
I really hope we don't have a postal vote. But if we are going to go to another election, that's another good reason to make sure that that we all update our details with the Electoral Commission and make sure we're properly enrolled.
That's right. You're on 101.9 Coast FM. You're in the empty closet with Andrew and Sam.
I was busy thinking about boys.
Empty Closet Radio, because no one wants to be stuck in the closet.
101.9 Coast FM, you're in the empty closet with Andrew and Sam. Now, Sam, you're aware of my love of very short news snippets. In fact, you would say I don't read anything longer than a tweet.
I was going to say you like sound bites because I wanted to shorten it down for you.
I love a good sound bite. That's why it's all I listen to. I just listen to podcasts that are little miniature sound bites.
Which is also why you go, Sam, did you hear about this grand news thing? And I'm like, that's actually not what happened, Andrew. Let me explain.
I don't care unless it's in the headline. I don't care.
So Andrew is a good example of why the media is manipulative without being dishonest. But sometimes is outright dishonest, and sometimes is misunderstanding.
I have too much stuff to do, Sam. I only have time for the headlines. I found a great newspaper for headlines. It's out of the Northern Territory somewhere. I think it's the Darwin Courier.
NT News.
They always have headlines about crocodiles.
They made it a policy. Their headlines are fantastic. Not the point.
Fantastically hilarious. I have not read any facts in that newspaper.
I have, but they're all things like, best man gets hit in the head by a flying dildo. You won't believe where it's from. That was front page news in the NT Times.
It's like when you see BuzzFeed made into an actual paper newspaper.
Yeah, except that the NT News does at times discuss very serious topics. But the reason that I wanted to bring this up, Andrew, aside from the fact that occasionally you need reminding to read beyond the headline, is because particularly given the, marriage equality debate that's going to happen, that's not subject to the same rules and regulations as other things, people don't have to be honest in this debate.
Because it's not a real election. Like, it's not a real thing. It's a survey. It's a giant survey. So there's no rules that apply.
Yeah, so if I decide to go around advertising that marriage equality is going to mean everyone gets a free house, I can say that. Like, hooray.
And you never ever have to deliver that.
Yeah, pretty much. So it's dodgy.
Can you imagine all the hate speech that's going to be hurled around? I really, really hope that there's going to be some way for us to negate some of that hate speech.
With any luck, but there is already hate speech coming out. But aside from that, one of the big thing that's come up, and I keep hearing about it with the left-leaning news and my friends, messaging, and people have talked to me about this soundbite from Malcolm Turnbull talking about how we're going to go to war with America. And people are like, so we need a national vote on whether I have human rights, but you'll send us into nuclear war without anybody say so, not even the parliaments. And they're very, very angry.
Yeah, we need to vote about everything, Sam. We're a democracy.
Well, that's what a true democracy is. We're a republic, but we don't like to call it that. But the thing is, this soundbite, I actually listened to the whole thing, and he didn't say we were going to war with the US, if they told us to. What he said was if North Korea attacks American soil, and he said if they bomb Guam, if they bomb the West Coast, the ANZUS treaty will be invoked. So that's a treaty between Australia, New Zealand and the US that basically says that in times of domestic threat, we come to each other's aid. So it was instigated, it was triggered after September 11, 2001, because that was a direct attack on American soil. And so that was triggered, and that was when Australia entered talks about what's going to be done about this. It doesn't mean that we just send ships away the next day to do whatever we're told, but it means that we have our three countries have decided we have an obligation to help each other out when we're under attack.
Basically, it's America's our big brother and we're definitely going to go and help. That's what he said, basically, right?
Not quite, because if it's that Trump declares war and North Korea hasn't bombed them, that's not the same thing. We're not going, when it's, Malcolm Turnbull hasn't said, we're just going to follow them into every fight they get into. It's somebody's come into their house and broken all the furniture and we're going to help them then. It's not the same thing. One's a direct attack and one's they've decided to declare war. And it's being presented as we're just going to follow them into everything. And that's not what Malcolm Turnbull said.
But realistically, that would probably be how it looks, right?
Well, not if you heard the whole quote. That's the point. He very specifically said, if North America bombs the US. He didn't say if they get into war with the US. He said if they bomb Guam, if they bomb the West Coast. And he did that particularly, and that got cut out of a lot of the sound bites. So people are really fuming about it when they don't actually understand what's going on. So my message to you, Andrew, and to those of you out there is, if something sounds outrageous, maybe do a Google search. Maybe finish reading the article, Andrew. But maybe do a Google search and check where it came from, because there's a lot of stuff that sounds like fake news that isn't. Like, I don't know, when Tony Abbott had his International Women's Day lunch in a men's only venue. I genuinely thought that was joke news. It was not joke news. But I researched it.
It's true. The truth is stranger than fiction. 101.9 Coast FM. You're in the Empty Closet with Andrew and Sam.
Empty Closet Radio, 9 p.m. Tuesdays, 101.9 Coast FM.
You're in the Empty Closet with Andrew and Sam. Now, that's pretty much all we have time for today. The takeaways from today's show. Number 1, make sure that you enroll to vote. Number 2, we've changed the marriage law heaps of times.
Number 3, don't put glitter in the envelopes.
Number 4, make sure your air mattress actually holds air before you go camping.
And number 5, make sure you're not a dual citizen if you want to be a political leader in Australia.
You can thank us for this sound advice when you do become Prime Minister from listening to such an educated show as ours.
And I am going to take you out with something written by a friend of mine on Facebook, Thomas Alili. Australians, the solution to your marriage equality plebiscite and your current citizenship saga are staring you in the face. Apply to the New Zealand government to become part of New Zealand. The advantages. Number 1, marriage equality is solved overnight. Boom. Number 2, you'll all be NZ citizens overnight. Number 3, covered by New Zealand's unwritten constitution. Lots of wiggle room if politician turns out to be from Canada or the UK or something silly. And number 4, you get to do the haka before rugby games. You'll also get to be on the winning side.
I think that's enough about the New Zealanders. Oh my goodness. Well, maybe we should. Maybe that is our solution. You know, it would probably, I think we'd have a hard sell on our hands though, Sam. I think it would be difficult to convince everyone that that was a good idea.
I think so too.
Although all of those reasons are very compelling. If you would like to catch up on any of our previous episodes, just search for Empty Closet Radio. We're in the top 10 on the major search engines. I'm bloody impressed. So just search for Empty Closet Radio and you'll be able to find us there. If you're on the socials, make sure you search for us again, Empty Closet Radio. Hit the like button or hit the tweet follow button, whatever it is. And you'll be kept up to date with all of our stuff. Clearly, I'm across it all, Sam.
We're so organised.
So organised. And, of course, make sure you get our podcast. Podcast. It's the best. You get a new one every week. You're on 101.9 Coast FM. You're in the Empty Closet with Andrew and Sam.
When the big bass line goes for bum bum, put your hands in the air like When the big bass line goes for bum bum, put your hands in the air like
Thanks for listening to The Empty Closet, brought to you by 1019 Coast FM Cairns.